The Honourable Jacqui Boydell.
Thank you, Madam President.
I might just indicate to you, in accordance with the temporary standing orders, at the last 5 minutes of the debate, the Honourable Colin de Grusser has the right of reply if he so chooses. The Honourable Jacqui Boydell.
Thank you, Madam President. I thank my colleague, the Honourable Colin de Grusser, for bringing the motion to the House today. There's been a lot of focus, in particular, on the effects of the machinery of government changes within the Department of Primary Industries and Regional Development, as there should, as the concerning results of their survey were found that there is a lot of staff there under an enormous amount of stress. And so bringing this motion to the House today in their defence is highlighting how they feel about their work environment. If there are steps to be being taken by the government to improve that, I support that and am glad to hear about those processes being undertaken. But I understand, as the Honourable Diane Evers said, even last week, speaking to someone working within the department, there are still concerns around the stress levels within the department. So it is a timely motion and something that needs to be continuously monitored, because if we don't highlight these issues in the House, Madam President, all we're doing is relying on the fact that someone at some point will address those issues. Well, I think the results of those surveys were concerning enough to bring that motion to the House to shine a bit of a light on them and to try and assist the staff of the department to work their way through with government a way to get through the stressful situation that some of them find themselves in. I'm not surprised to hear that there is still a stressful environment by some people at the Department of Primary Industries and Regional Development. And I think what underpins that, Madam President, is the media released by the Treasurer, the Honourable Ben Wyatt, in September 2017, when he set out the 17-18 state budget. And he says, the 2017-18 state budget includes a number of wide-ranging reforms that, once implemented, will deliver lasting reform to the public sector at a lower cost to taxpayers. The previously announced Service Priority Review will examine the functions, operations and culture of the Western Australian public sector. Its goal is to drive lasting reform of service delivery, accountability and efficiency. Those words, Madam President, hang over the employees in the public sector and wonder what more accountability, what more service reform and what more efficiencies will be driven. So that level of confidence has not yet returned to the public sector. And in debating the machinery of government changes previously in this House, that fact has been highlighted by many members around the concerns and the impacts of staff in particular. It became really clear how much of a budget cut DPIRD are having to work with when, under questioning from my colleague, the Honourable Martin Aldridge, on the 8th of November last year, the Minister for Regional Development admitted to a $60 million reduction in expenditure relating to DPIRD. And this included $45.4 million in an underspend on projects and $6.8 million in a reduction in salaries. Enormous figures, Madam President, for any department to be operating under, and I would question how any department under such budget constraints and such budgetary pressure could possibly satisfactorily implement lasting reform of service delivery, accountability and efficiency. How does that happen when you're under that amount of budgetary constraint? So there is no wonder that those concerns still exist. From a regional development perspective, Madam President, the concerns that I want to highlight more in terms of the opportunities being missed in regional Western Australia, I want to talk about very quickly. And the other thing that I would highlight, Madam President, is in fact on DPIRD's own strategic intent document of 2018-2021 outlines the values of its department. We value relationships. We are resilient, we are responsive, and we focus on results. Well, they're all nice motherhood statements, Madam President, and I'm sure that the staff within DPIRD want to deliver on those values set out on their own website. Very difficult to do when you don't have an environment that allows you to do that. From a royalties for regions perspective, we have seen time and time again with each state budget the erosion of the royalties for regions program, and we've seen it eroded. We've seen it eroded by $1.6 billion, which has been replaced in royalties for regions funding by government subsidies, otherwise funded by consolidated revenue. $1.1 billion in water corp subsidies, $160 billion in orange school buses, $35.2 million in regional education assistance. The reason this is an issue when it's funded out of the Royalties for Regions Fund is that the Royalties for Regions Fund is a volatile fund because the income flowing into it is a result of the asset of iron ore and resources, iron ore in particular, but resources of this state that flow in from royalties into that program. So it is a volatile program. So to fund essential government services in regional areas purely from the Royalties for Regions Fund actually put at risk, Madam President, those essential government services going into regional Western Australia. That is a concern for regional people. What it also does, Madam President, is highlights a concern for regional people because they actually can't see a regional development agenda being pushed by this government. And we've seen that, Madam President, by the underspend of the Royalties for Regions Fund by $319 million, an underspend of this government in regional areas, Madam President. So I question where the regional development agenda of the Department of Primary Industries and Regional Development is. Where does that exist when there's an underspend, where there's an erosion of the Royalties for Regions program, and lost opportunity to partner potentially with private investors, with business, to see development opportunities expanded on in our regional areas. They're sitting there waiting. There are investors waiting. I've talked about this previously, for the government to partner with them, allow them to access the resources of our regional areas, particularly in agriculture. The government doesn't have to bear the whole cost of regional development, particularly in agriculture. There are private investors waiting to invest and build up our agricultural sector, and that in turn delivers regional development, Madam President. So those two departments working together, if that actually works, would actually be fantastic for regional development and agriculture in itself. We haven't seen that yet. I do hope to see it, and I do want to join other members of this House in particularly supporting part 3 of the motion, where we do call on the Premier and the Minister for Regional Development to immediately take action on those job losses within the department and address the mental health concerns of those employees. That is particularly important. But in doing so, address some of the regional development opportunities missed, because they're being missed by those people working in regional development.